The clock is ticking. The order has been given. And somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean right now, 3,000 of America's most elite paratroopers are hurtling through the darkness inside C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft, locked, loaded, and headed straight toward the most dangerous flashpoint on the planet. This is not a drill. This is not a show of force for the cameras. This is the 82nd Airborne Division, the tip of America's spear, and they are already in the air. Let's talk about what is actually happening, because the scale of this deployment is unlike anything most people have seen in years. And when you understand exactly what is being moved, where it is going, and what it is designed to do, you will understand why the entire region is holding its breath right now. Before the sun even cracked the horizon, the base was already alive. In the barracks and staging areas, roughly 3,000 paratroopers were doing what the 82nd Airborne does better than any fighting force in the world. They were getting ready to go. Not in days, not in weeks. The 82nd Airborne's Division Ready Brigade operates under one of the most demanding deployment mandates in all of military history. Wheels up within 18 hours of notification. 18 hours. That means the moment the order drops, the clock starts. And these soldiers know it. Rucksacks were packed with clothing, rations, and field essentials. M4 rifles were broken down on bunks and workbenches. Bolt carrier groups wiped clean, oiled, reassembled, function checked. Machine gunners cracked open crates of belted ammunition, feeding linked rounds through their weapons to verify smooth feeding before coiling the belts and packing them into ammo cans, alongside spare barrels and cleaning kits. Every weapon, every piece of equipment, every soldier had to be ready before the first light of dawn, because by dawn, they needed to be on the aircraft, and they were. Out on the airfield, the operation was already at full tempo. Ground crews swarmed the C-17s lined up on the tarmac in the pre-dawn darkness. Loadmasters directed forklifts hauling pallet after pallet of military equipment up the rear cargo ramps and into the massive aircraft bays. These were not just supplies. These were weapons systems, armored Humvees, armored trucks, and most significantly, high-mobility artillery rocket system vehicles, better known as HIMARS. Those rocket launchers were chained to the cargo decks of the aircraft. Think about that for a second. They loaded rocket artillery onto the planes. This is not a peacekeeping mission. This is a combat-ready force being projected at maximum speed to a location where leadership clearly believes it may need to fight. In the cockpits, pilots powered up avionics and worked through their pre-flight checks one system at a time. Navigation computers, radar arrays, flight management systems, every single instrument verified before a single soldier stepped foot on the ramp. The 82nd does not cut corners, not on this, not ever. Then the order came down to the hangars. Time to move. 3,000 soldiers grabbed their bags, their personal weapons, and filed out of the buildings and onto the airfield in long, disciplined columns. At the rear ramps of the waiting C-17s, duffel bags and hard cases were loaded onto the cargo roller systems built into the aircraft floors. Inside the bays, soldiers stacked gear tight, pulling cargo straps and tie-down cables across the load to lock everything in place for the long flight ahead. Then the paratroopers climbed aboard, taking their seats along the walls and center rows of the aircraft. The mood, by all accounts, was loose. Soldiers talked, cracked jokes, pulled out phones for one last look before stowing them. Most of these men and women have done this before. Loading onto a C-17 is as routine to an 82nd Airborne paratrooper as boarding a commercial flight is to a business traveler. The uniform is different. The destination is far more dangerous. But the professionalism is absolute. The rear cargo ramps lifted. The upper door sections folded down and sealed. Engines started. All 4 Pratt & Whitney turbofans spooling up one after another, that distinctive rising whine filling the air around the aircraft. Then the C-17s taxied, lined up, accelerated, and lifted off one by one into the morning sky, climbing out over the Carolina coast and turning east. 14 hours later, the first aircraft touched down at a military airfield in Qatar. The rear ramp dropped the instant the plane reached the unloading area. There was no waiting. The HIMARS rocket vehicles started their engines, uncoupled from their tie-down chains, and drove straight down the ramp onto the tarmac. They did not pause at the airfield. They drove directly to their assigned firing positions near the border. Let that land. These rocket artillery systems, capable of striking targets at distances of over 40 miles with pinpoint precision, were already moving to combat positions before the aircraft had even shut down their engines. Armored vehicles followed behind them. Cargo pallets were yanked off by forklifts running at full speed. The turnaround was ruthlessly efficient, but the 82nd Airborne was only part of the story unfolding that day. Out on the water, aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln operating in the region, United States Marines were loading into helicopters on the flight deck. Full combat load, rifles, body armor, packs, and ammunition. They climbed aboard Sikorsky MH-60S Nighthawk helicopters and V-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft parked on the deck, and one by one those aircraft lifted off and turned toward the Qatari coastline. The Marines were being concentrated for one specific purpose: rapid reaction capability. A large, heavily armed ground force positioned close enough to the action that if the situation escalated, if Iran made a move, if a miscalculation occurred, if a single spark ignited this powder keg, American forces could respond within minutes, not hours. The Marines landed in Qatar and moved directly to a camp that advanced teams had already established. Tents were up, perimeters were set, communication systems were running. The arriving troops received a quick orientation briefing and went straight to their positions. No delay, no adjustment period. Ready to fight from the moment they hit the ground, and then the ships began their work offshore. Transport vessels launched amphibious assault vehicles directly into the water. Heavy, armored, tracked machines built to operate on both sea and land. In the water, they are driven by water jets mounted at the rear of the hull, capable of pushing through the ocean at up to 8 knots. Once they reach the shoreline, the water jets shut down, the tracks engage, and the vehicle drives directly up the beach like a conventional armored personnel carrier. Each one can carry up to 21 fully equipped Marines, armed with a turret-mounted machine gun and grenade launcher. Wave after wave of these vehicles churned through the water toward the coast. Behind them came something even more dramatic. Landing craft air cushion vehicles, massive military hovercraft, emerged from the transport ships and raced across the surface of the water at speeds exceeding 40 knots, riding on a cushion of air generated by enormous fans at their sterns, spraying seawater in massive white rooster tails behind them. Each LCAC can carry up to 60 tons of cargo, trucks, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces, and they do not slow down when they hit the beach. They ride straight up onto the sand, the ramp drops, and the vehicles inside drive off onto solid ground. Shipped to shore in minutes, without a pier, without a port. Multiple LCACs made repeated runs between the ships and the beach, ferrying vehicle after vehicle, load after load, until the entire force was ashore. The sky above all of this was not quiet either. At the Qatar airfield, helicopter crews were loading belt ammunition into the feed trays of M240 machine guns mounted on their aircraft doors. The belts were inspected link by link, fed through the receivers, charging handles pulled back. Hot guns. The helicopters lifted off and began flying continuous patrol patterns over the surrounding territory, scanning both sky and ground for Iranian drones. The Shahed series drones that Iran has used with devastating effect across the region were a serious and immediate threat. If one appeared on sensors or was spotted visually by a door gunner, it would be engaged and destroyed before it ever reached the troops or the base below. The patrols ran continuously, one helicopter returning to refuel and rearm while another took its place in the air. The perimeter was covered at all times, day and night. Now let's zoom out for a moment and talk about what all of this actually means, because context matters enormously here. The 82nd Airborne Division is not a unit that gets sent somewhere to wave flags and look imposing. These are the paratroopers who jump out of aircraft into combat zones ahead of everything else. They are the force America reaches for when time has run out and the situation demands immediate action. The fact that an entire brigade, 3,000 soldiers has been activated and deployed is a serious signal. The 18-hour deployment standard these soldiers operate under exists precisely because the scenarios the 82nd trains for are the scenarios where there is no time to wait. The Strait of Hormuz is why. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow strip of water every single day. Iranian missiles, mines, and fast boats could theoretically threaten that passage in ways that would send global energy markets into freefall within hours. Iran knows this. The United States knows this. Every military planner in the world knows this. And the positioning of American forces, paratroopers, Marines, HIMARS rocket artillery, amphibious assault vehicles, and continuous air cover is a direct, unmistakable message that the United States intends to keep that strait open by whatever means necessary. What makes this moment particularly striking is the speed and ferocity with which American military power has been brought to bear in this region. People who have watched these situations closely for years are noting something different about the posture right now. The forces being assembled are not configured purely for deterrence. They are configured for action. HIMARS vehicles do not drive to firing positions at the border for a photo opportunity. Amphibious assault vehicles do not hit beaches in combat load for a training exercise. Door gunners do not load hot machine guns over hostile territory for a demonstration. Every piece of equipment being moved, every position being established, is oriented toward one mission: the ability to close with and destroy an enemy rapidly from the first moment of engagement. The scale of what happened to Iranian military capability in recent months cannot be understated. The argument being made in defense and military circles is stark. Never before in the modern era has a military with Iran's resources, a real navy, an air force, sophisticated air defense networks, hardened underground bunkers, experienced leadership, and decades of investment in asymmetric warfare capability been degraded as rapidly and comprehensively as Iranian military power has been in this period. What took years to build has been systematically dismantled, and the forces now assembling near the Strait of Hormuz represent the follow-through, the guarantee that the window of vulnerability does not close before American objectives are secured. For the paratroopers sitting in those C-17s, the geopolitical calculus is someone else's job. Their job is simpler and far more difficult at the same time. They pack their rifles, they clean their weapons, they load their gear, they climb aboard, they fly 14 hours across the ocean, they hit the ground running, they take their positions, and they wait for the order that may or may not come, but they are ready to execute it the instant it does. That readiness, that 18-hour, anywhere in the world leave right now capability, is what the 82nd Airborne has built itself around for decades. It is what makes them one of the most powerful rapid response forces on the face of the earth. And right now, 3,000 of those paratroopers are in Qatar. HIMARS are pointed at targets, Marines are at their fighting positions, hovercraft are running their routes, and helicopter door gunners are scanning the skies. The Strait of Hormuz has never been more heavily watched. It has never had more American combat power positioned around it than it does at this moment. And the world is watching to see what happens next. This is a developing story, and we will be tracking every development as it happens. If you found this breakdown valuable, if you want to understand what is really happening in this region beyond the headlines, beyond the noise, beyond the spin, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. Hit that like button right now, because it helps more people find coverage like this when it matters most. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think this deployment signals? Is this deterrence, or is this the opening move of something much larger? We want to hear from you. And if you are not yet subscribed to Red Dust Report, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because when the next development breaks in this story, you do not want to be the last one to know.